Hi, I'm Laurence Shatkin, author of several books about careers. If you're thinking about alternatives to college, maybe you should consider apprenticeship as a route to a high-skill, high-paying occupation. Let's start by looking at what apprenticeship is exactly, and keep in mind that what I'll be talking about is formal apprenticeship, not informal on-the-job training. One thing to remember about apprenticeship is that it is a form of occupational training, and by that I mean it's not training that leads you towards one particular job at one particular work site doing one particular task. It teaches you an occupation that you can use in many different work sites for many different employers, probably for years to come. Two components that you'll find in every formal apprenticeship are worksite learning and classroom learning. There are skills that you can't learn on the work site because they're more theoretical in nature, and you really need to study those in a classroom. And conversely, there are skills that you can only learn at the work site because they're practical hands-on skills. Another component of apprenticeship is the fact that you are paid for your work. The work you are doing is real work. It actually accomplishes things. It serves a useful purpose for the employer. For that reason, you are paid. And then finally, if it's a formal apprenticeship, it results in a credential. It's something that you can take to other employers. It's something you can take anywhere in the country if it's a nationally recognized apprenticeship. Therefore, it's something that is a valuable credential. Apprenticeship is growing as a means of learning. About 470,000 Americans are now apprenticed. There are over 1,000 apprenticeship standards that are registered with the U.S. Department of Labor. This covers a large number of occupations, over 350, and continually growing. If you look at the industries that use apprenticeship, you'll notice that construction dominates. About 3/4 of the apprentices are working in construction. However, it is growing in other fields. The bars in this chart represent different industries that use apprenticeship, and I've divided them by the clever colors of pink and blue to indicate the amount of male and female participation in apprenticeship in each industry. And as you can see, female participation is lowest in construction and highest in the service industries. Apprenticeship used to be considered primarily a route for men, and the terminology that was used for people who had completed an apprenticeship, the term journeyman, indicates this tradition. However, women are playing more of a role nowadays, and we're hearing terms like journey worker being used instead of journeyman. And part of this change in the notion of what apprentices are and what they do is getting away from the notion that apprentices are only grease monkeys. For example, some of the occupations that have become apprenticeable recently are sterile processing technicians, and help desk technicians, accounting technicians. These are not grease monkey jobs. Here are some others. And these are not grease monkey jobs. One of the appeals of apprenticeship as a career route is the fact that you're not paying tuition for the training, someone else is paying for your training. For example, unions may be paying for this, employers, or a joint agreement between the two, or there are apprenticeships that can be taken in the armed forces. This table is a listing of the most popular apprenticeships, and of course you'll notice that the construction careers are very heavily represented here. This listing of the best apprenticeable occupations is based entirely on economic factors. There are figures there for earnings, for growth, and for job openings. And what I did was to take all of the apprenticeable occupations, rank them by each of these three economic criteria, and then choose the occupations that had the very highest combination of these three factors. And so you'll see among these, the paralegals and legal assistants come out in first place, computer support specialists come out, and so forth. The earnings represent a national median, and that includes all workers, whether they were apprenticed or not. Certainly there are regional variations. The column about growth indicates how fast the occupation is expected to grow between 2006 and 2016. And the column for openings is the average number of annual openings for the occupation between 2006 and 2016. Certainly there are many other criteria that you should bear in mind when you decide what occupation is best for you. You also have to consider whether you would enjoy the work and whether you can find an apprenticeship that will train you in the work. Not everyone will be accepted into an apprenticeship. For example, there's a minimum age that's required, and there's usually a minimal education requirement also. Usually it's just high school. But there may be certain courses that you're required to have on your record, which would be helpful in the occupation. In some cases, it may be helpful to have college in your background, or military training, or some other form of training. When the occupation involves any sort of physical demands, often there's a requirement for a doctor's statement that you have the fitness to handle the work. Now, employers are not allowed to discriminate on the basis of handicaps. If the work can be done with certain accommodations, then you simply have to show that you can do the work with the accommodations. Sometimes there's fitness testing. For example, you may have to carry a certain weight a certain distance. You may have to show citizenship or a green card that indicates you're eligible to work, but I have heard of cases where apprenticeship programs have accepted people who are not citizens. In some occupations, particularly some construction trades, the work site can change from one day to the next, and so you need some form of transportation that can get you there. You may be tested to show that you have some sort of special aptitude that is necessary for the work. Often there's an interview in which you show your interest in the career and the fact that you're motivated to do well in it. Many apprenticeship programs have a point system in which points are assigned for various criteria in order to decide who gets to the top of the waiting list. Now, I said earlier that apprenticeships consist of worksite learning and classroom learning. Usually the worksite learning consists of 2,000 hours per year, and that's a full-time 40-hour-a-week job with about 2 weeks of vacation per year. Usually it lasts about 4 years, but there's a great deal of variation, depending on the range of skills that is required to be learned. The classroom learning usually comes to about the equivalent of 2 classes per semester, and usually it's held in night school because people are working at the worksite doing the worksite learning during the day. In some cases, you can place out of taking certain classes because you have some classes in your academic background or because you can demonstrate the knowledge. In some cases, you enroll in an associate degree program, and so when the program is completed, you not only have the apprenticeship that you've completed, but also an associate degree. One of the new wrinkles in apprenticeship is competency-based and hybrid programs. In a competency-based program, there's no time requirement. Instead, the program uses assessments to decide when you've mastered the skills. Hybrid programs are similar in that they also use assessments, but they require a certain minimum number of hours. The advantage of these programs is that apprentices who have work experience that's relevant and have already mastered some of the skills can progress faster, or maybe they're quick learners and therefore can progress faster. As I said earlier, one of the features of apprenticeship as a learning program is that you actually get paid for doing the work. Typically, the pay starts at about half the journey worker's hourly rate, and the pay increases as you get more experience and become a more skilled worker. In the very last phase of the apprenticeship, you're earning about 90% of the journey worker's rate. But there are certain expenses that the apprentice must pay for. Usually there are certain basic tools for the job, and these are tools that the apprentice will use even after becoming a journey worker. There may be protective clothing or work boots. The night classes often must be paid for, though sometimes the fees are waived or they're covered by benefits or by the sponsor of the program. Usually there are textbooks for the night classes, and you have to pay for those too. If it's a union-based program, then usually there are union dues, though usually these are reduced for apprentices. Now let's look at the advantages of apprenticeship. Unlike informal on-the-job training, an apprenticeship is designed to teach you the full rotation of skills. So you are a skilled worker who can do many different kinds of jobs, not just one job that you've been trained for. In an apprenticeship, you get a lot of personal attention. On the average, there are 8 apprentices for every journey worker who's supervising you. When you finish, you have documentation of your accomplishments. That's your journey worker status, and it's something that employers value everywhere. You also get to know the people you work with and the employers you work for, and therefore you develop a network of contacts that can help find you jobs down the road. Not everyone completes an apprenticeship. Sometimes things go wrong. For one thing, you may not get into the apprenticeship to begin with because often there's a lot of competition for entry. Some apprentices are discouraged by the low level of the initial tasks and the pay that they receive at first. On the other hand, some find they can't handle the work tasks or the classes, and it may be a question of physical ability for the work tasks, it may be a question of intellectual ability for the classes, or it may be that they just don't have an interest in them. There is a risk of layoffs. When an industry is in trouble, often the apprentices are the first ones to be laid off. The apprenticeship agreement usually says that you have to be hired back again if work becomes available again. Late in the program, when apprentices have developed a lot of skills, they may be tempted by job offers elsewhere. They may find that they're fully qualified to take those jobs, and they may bail out of the apprenticeship and not get journey worker status as a result. Thanks for watching this presentation.